Okay. All right, guys, let's go ahead and get started. We're going to be talking about a chemical reaction today called photosynthesis, and this is another energy reaction. The goal of photosynthesis is to make high energy sugar using sunlight. So let's maybe underline the word make sugar, because that's basically what that's saying, right? Plants are making sugar. Who does it? Plants do it, right? We're terrestrial organisms. That means we like to live on land. So we see all kinds of forests and trees, right? Whenever we think about photosynthesis, sometimes we think of the tropical rainforest where all those trees are. But did you know, fun fact, most of the photosynthesis on the planet happens in the oceans, right? And it's not trees that are doing it. It's little bitty single-celled prokaryotic bacteria. Most of the photosynthesis on the planet is being done by bacteria that live in our oceans. The oceans take up most of our planet, right? So it should make sense that there's lots of space for these algae or bacteria to do photosynthesis. And that's why it's partially why it's so important that our oceans are healthy as well, right? It's not just so we can go have a nice vacation at the beach. It's so that those bacteria can do photosynthesis and take carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere as well. What is it? It's a series of chemical reactions. You guys remember what that means, right? Bonds break, atoms rearrange, new bonds form, and the energy, does it stay the same or does it change? It changes, right? The energy changes. So where does this happen? This is happening in the chloroplast. And we got a nice little diagram of the chloroplast, right? There's all these different parts. Don't worry about knowing the parts, okay? You don't need to know the parts. In fact, let's just go ahead and we're not underlining, we're crossing out. We don't really care to know the names of these parts, okay? But what we do care to know about is that there's an organelle called a chloroplast, and that's where photosynthesis happens. And inside, there's all these other little compartments. We can think of this as kind of like a solar panel, right? A solar panel captures sunlight and makes electrical energy from it, right? So this is a solar panel. It's collecting sunlight, but it's making sugar instead of electricity. But it's still a form of energy. Any questions so far? You good, Lindsay? Okay. Here we go. Now, don't be intimidated. Here is the chemical formula for photosynthesis, okay? I've written it in two different ways, but let's start here just with the middle part where that arrow is, right? You guys recognize that arrow. That means that bonds are breaking, atoms are rearranging, new bonds are forming, and the energy is changing, right? And so everything before the arrow, we can consider the what? You guys remember? What do we start with? Anybody at home remember? What are the substances we start with in a chemical reaction? They're like the ingredients that we make into the cake. I'll give you two choices, okay? It's either the reactants or the products. Close, just the opposite, the reactants. Okay? So the reactants, that's what we start with. And then at the end, after the change has occurred, we end up with products. Okay, so it's the same basic thing that we were looking at before, right? We start with reactants, we mix the ingredients together, we throw them in the oven, right? And then after the reaction, we have a cake, right? We have the products. And all of the atoms that we started with are present after the reaction. They're just rearranged, right? They have new partners. Okay? This is the reaction for photosynthesis. So if we're going to make a photosynthesis cake, the ingredients that we need are carbon dioxide and water. And instead of throwing it in the oven, we're going to use sunlight, right? And at the end, the cake is actually glucose, sugar, and oxygen, okay? I've written this in two different ways. The first way is the easy way to understand because it's all in words and we all speak English, right? But the second part is the same reaction, only in symbols. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to connect sunlight to sunlight. Carbon dioxide, the symbol for carbon dioxide is CO2, right? Carbon dioxide, there's that prefix di again, right? That means two. In this case, not two phosphates, but two oxygens. Here's my water. You guys know the formula for water is H2O, right? And then here's, maybe this one's a new one for us. The formula for glucose is C6H12O6. C6H12O6. That means there's 12 hydrogen atoms and 6 oxygen atoms, and they're all bonded together into one particle, 24 parts. And then the last part, oxygen. Oxygen is an interesting atom because when it's by itself, it reacts with itself. And so that's why it's O2. O2, oxygen reacts with itself to make a little oxygen molecule. 2 oxygen atoms bonded together. Any questions here? So the left side are the reactants, they're the ingredients. The right side are the products. The ingredients are carbon dioxide and water. The products are glucose and oxygen. And the thing that powers the whole thing is sunlight. Great.
Oh, and Mr. Kramer, glucose is known as sugar.
Term for sugar, right? There's many different kinds of sugar. Glucose is one kind. Okay.
Yep.
Okay. So where are these reactants and products coming from, and where are they going from? And that's what the next little bit here has to do with. So carbon dioxide, let's underline, comes from the atmosphere. It comes from the atmosphere. It's a greenhouse gas. It comes from the atmosphere, and it provides the carbon that makes up the glucose. Right, so I highlighted in bold there the C in C6H12O6. Where do those 6 carbons come from? They come from 6 carbon dioxides. The water comes from precipitation, which you guys remember is just a fancy word for rain, right? It's the water that rains down on the earth. So carbon dioxide and water, abundant substances that are not high in energy, right? At the end of this, we end up with glucose, which is basically sugar and is stored inside of plants. So maybe let's underline stored energy. Glucose is stored energy inside of plants. And the last little bit, oxygen, that gets released to the air, right? And remember, is oxygen high energy? No. Oxygen's not high energy. Do you recognize this graph? We looked at this before with ADP and ATP. Okay, this graph represents photosynthesis's energy change as well. So let's label this graph. This graph represents the change that happens in photosynthesis. Oh, that's Kate. No, that's Court. Hey, Court. In this case, we're starting with low energy carbon dioxides. Let's put CO2 over by where it says C. And D, in this case, represents glucose. C6H12O6. So we're going from something that's low on energy on the y-axis to something that's high in energy on the y-axis. The energy is going up. Does that mean this reaction stores energy or releases energy? The energy goes up. Are we storing energy by making sugar, or are we releasing it? We think. Good guess. Just the opposite. In this case, we're storing energy. The energy is going up from carbon dioxide to glucose. Let's write the word store. We're storing energy, right? Where's all this energy coming from to make this high energy sugar? You guys remember? It's free. All around us every day. Close. sunlight, right? Light is a form of energy. We kind of take it for granted that we have sunlight all around us, but sunlight's providing the energy, okay? So again, just to summarize, what's this graph showing? We're starting with low energy reactants. Maybe we should write that down. Reactants go here, products go here. We're starting with low energy reactants, and we're ending up with high energy products. And as we do that, the energy goes up. That means we're storing energy using light as the source. Any questions? That's it. That's all for today. New stuff.